right? And this might be confusing when you look at the portal or Azure services. It's called disaster recovery rather than the site recovery. Sometimes it is covered in the application as well, right? But all those concepts are almost similar.
Applications and sites.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what it is basically is the warm standby copy of the VM. Okay. And then VM disk changes are replicated to the site recovery, right? Meaning it's in different regions. So whenever we talk about site recovery, it's basically used for the disaster recovery. Okay. And then the main thing about site recovery is that when you say I want to do site recovery backup, it's basically it will make sure that your recovery vault is in a different region than the one which is in your current VM or what you want to back up, basically.
Do they oblige you to it, or you have to remember it yourself?
No, it will make
will.
sure. Yeah, it will not allow you to select a recovery vault in the same region as your VM.
And site recovery always is to a VHD?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So for application scenarios, you can have different application scenarios, like you can do Azure VMs from one region to another if you're fully in the cloud. If you wanted to do the on-prem to the cloud, you can do as well. So you can have on-prem Hyper-V or VMware VMs to Azure cloud. You can do an application scenario like that, or you can do from on-prem to on-prem as well using the Azure backup servers. So you have all the scenarios available.
So we have to remember all those names, the Hyper-V, VMware.
No, I mean, no, you don't have to. There's certain issues with the VMware VMs. So, but from a certification perspective, don't worry about that for now. I mean, as a solution architect, when you go, you need to look at all these fine prints onto what you can do, what you cannot do. Like for example, certain VMware versions will not work with the backup process.
Because you have legacy systems or something like that, right?
Correct. Okay. And then and there are certain limitations to that, but you don't have to worry about that. Right now, you need to understand at a high level what you can do with the disaster recovery. Okay. And you need to recovery plan to failover servers together. Generally, when you do, and why it is important is like this, right? When you want to do disaster recovery, right? You don't want to do one VM at a time, right? Because maybe your application is a 3-tier application, right? Which has, let's say, a VM, your app VM, and then you might have a database VM, right? And then let's say your application is using these 3 servers, right? And then what we are talking about the disaster recovery is that in a different region, right? You want to bring up this whole application, right? So not one VM, but you want to bring up all the 3 VMs, right? Make sense?
Well, depends.
Right? So let's say your current region is East, right? And then you choose a West region for your site recovery. So you see now it is called site recovery, means you want to recover the whole site, right?
What would they mean by site?
Yeah. So when you say site, it's like a set of VMs or VNets and everything together.
You define the site for you? You define it, or?
Yes, you can define. So that's what you do in the recovery plan. So when it says recovery plan to failover servers together, you define which servers you want to recover at once. Makes sense? So instead of like one server, you are saying, I want to recover all the 3 VMs, so 3 servers. Makes sense? So they have maybe certain VHDs. So let's say your 3 servers are using 10 VHDs or 10 disks, right? So basically what you are doing is creating a replica of this 10 disks here. So basically you're backing up it here, right?
But it's just as file, not as
but they're just this, they're not VMs right now,
Yeah.
right? But let's say this goes down, then you want to start creating the VMs from this disk. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
This is what a site recovery means, right? So you set up VMs, right? You're creating a warm standby, means you don't have the VMs here yet. Your backups are getting created in this region.
You keep using the warm.
Right.
That
You keep using the east, and then when the east goes down, right, you want west to stand up with these 3 VMs. This you already have, so it's going to, restore the disk on this VMs, right? And then you do an automatic failover based on the DNS or whatever switch from this region to this region.
Is it automatic?
It is not automatic. You
Is
can
it
make it
locked?
automatic if you want. Okay. So that's what the site recovery process is all about.
The recovery can be on the same region, right?
No.
No.
It has to be on a different.
Because the
Yeah.
region is not.
Okay, makes sense. Always east and stuff. Why do I always want east?
Hmm?
Let's go west.
You can do west. That's fine.
More sunny, right?
Yeah, less
Nice
weather.
weather.
You're not getting what? 5 feet of snow?
Okay. So it's something like this, right? You have the disks here, right? And then you're getting a replication here. Your VMs are not set up here. Make sense?
Yeah,
This
it's
is the
just
main
in
part.
waiting.
Yeah, so
It's
this
just
is-
data.
This is the backup,
Mhm.
right? When this region goes down on the east side, basically it will
Okay.
stand up all of them here as part of the site recovery. Okay. So let me show you some of this. Yeah.
When you create the VMs in a new region, you will have to install all the applications and everything again.
No, if you're doing a whole VM backup, right, it will restore from that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Makes sense? Yeah.
You don't have to launch it in that same region where you are saving it.
No,
You can go to any, I mean, you can push it to any other region.
I mean, right now, the way it is because your backup is available
The easy
here,
way is to do it in
right?
that region.
So it will take up that region to stand up those VMs. But then if you want to manually take this backup somewhere else and create it, you can still do that. Okay. So let me show you some of this here. So if I go to, let's say, site recovery, you want to see that, right? Let me see my names here. If I go to disaster recovery, right?
Mm-hmm. So site recovery, disaster recovery are the same thing.
Same thing. Oh, I did not start this VM. That's why it is complaining. Okay. So when you do this, right? So let me start this VM. Maybe I stopped it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the recovery. That's a better mission. Okay, you understand.
No, so my VM was
VM.
stopped. So because for the recovery, it has to start the application, right? So saying start your VM first.
For the VM, when it gives you the price per month,
Mm-hmm.
do they still charge you per second?
Yeah.
And like, so that's whatever that amount, they just dividing it by seconds or it's a minute?
No, it is an hourly price.
Hourly price?
Yeah. And then you can,
Because they give you the price per month, so they divide that by the amount.
no,
of-
they will give you by hour the price, always.
When I created the VM, it says, for example, when you created this, it says $7.85 per month.
That will give you the hourly price.
That's
I'll show you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 0.014 something.
Yeah, it says $1.0184 per hour.
Yeah. So let's say if you run the VM less than 1 hour,
Hold on.
Yeah, for the 1 hour, it will charge you that. But if you use like for 15 minutes, you'll get charged only for 15 minutes.
oh, okay.
So what's their pricing structure? Like, for example, AWS charge you in some services per minute, some services per second.
Yeah,
So what's the structure of Azure? It's like, it's a minute, it's a second,
it's seconds.
it's second.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
No matter what they tell you, is there like a documentation for that? Like that tell you exactly how the structure works for each service?
Yeah. So if you go to pricing, they for each resource, they have given you like how they're going to charge you. Okay, so this is started. Let's go to the recovery and let's quickly see the setup here. So right now my VM is in the East region. Okay, so if you look at the VM overview, it should be in the East region. Yeah, so it says East US, right? Now, if I go to the disaster recovery,
It's giving you the west of the.
yeah, it's giving me a West as one of the options. I can choose another
That's the
region if
brown
I
one,
want.
right? That's the
Yeah.
brown one. Mhm.
Yeah, you see this map,
Yeah.
you can see like how and where it is going.
Can you hold
Okay.
over one of them and see? It doesn't, right?
It doesn't show you the name, but I can select and so the green ones are, I think, the only ones where I can
You
go
can do
with
the
this.
recovery.
Yeah. So I can select a different region if I want. The one condition is that in that region, you should have a recovery vault. So you should have created the recovery vault in that region in order to start that application. Okay. So if I go here and say, hey, I want to keep it West US.
But you don't have a vault for every region in there.
No, so you need to create. So let's say you are working out of 3 regions, right? You have East region, West region, and let's say East in Asia region. When you want to set up a site recovery, what you need to do is you need to have 2 regions with the recovery vaults. Okay. So from the VMs are deployed in East, you want to take a recovery in West, your vault should be in the West. Okay.
So it would give you the option to, you can select the region and then have the option to create new one. new vaults.
Let's see if it shows you that. So if I go to the advanced settings, it will also show you the subscription and the resource group, network, and this one, right?
Mhm.
So for this VM, right, it is telling me that when it is restored into the West region, it will create a new resource group called labs2 -ASR. ASR stands for Application Site Recovery. Sorry, Azure Site Recovery. So it will create a new resource group, new VNet, and then availability right now it is saying single instance. I can set up an availability set, and then proximity placement group. Make sense?
Yeah.
So in the new region where it would be deployed, you can configure it here. Make sense? Or you can select from the existing if you had.
If you have
Right.
something in there.
So if you had already created some network in the West and you want to deploy your VMs, that would be the generally case. So you would say, hey, I want to restore these VMs in this particular resource group, in this particular VNet, in this particular placement group. Make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. And then you can specify your vault somewhere here. Give me one. So yeah, here in the application settings, let's see. So it has selected the US West vault, which I was creating in the morning. Makes sense?
Mhm.
So if it is not there, I don't think it is allowed me to create a new one. So you have to just make sure that you have one available. Okay.
It doesn't, when you click, it doesn't give anything.
No, so let's try that out. I have not tried that, but let's say if I go back and then select a different region where I don't have a vault, right? So if I say, hey, instead of this, let's go to West.
Yeah, we'll create one for you.
Oh, does it create?
Yeah, but it doesn't give you the option to create one, but it will create one.
Let's see. Let's see.
Or it's still selecting the US West. There we go.
Why does US West?
But it doesn't say new.
I select Oh, West 2. Let's select West Europe, for example, right? So I'm doing a replication now here. I do next settings. Okay.
No. There we go, same thing. Yes, West.
See, it is a drop down. It doesn't allow you to create a new one. So I think in the validation, it might.
You can edit.
Yeah, I cannot add it. So just remember, you just need a vault in that region where you want to do the site recovery. Okay. And then
Well, it will give you an error. Anyway.
it will give you an error if it is not there.
No, actually, I don't have a vault in the US West, and it created one for me.
Oh, it created.
Yeah,
the
it's a
same-
new
with the
site
same name?
recovery vault and -1 West US.
Oh, so it might be, but for me, I think maybe there's
Yeah.
some UI error here then, because I'm selecting West Europe. It is still not changing my services vault here. But anyway, so the idea is you need to have a vault there because your storage is going to be there, right? So you select that, and then you can select all these, your new resource group, network, and proximity placement group. And then when you do this, you see it is starting the replication, right? So it will start asynchronous replication between the VHDs. And then when you do a recovery, basically at that point, it will bring up your VM. So right now you're just creating a warm stand-up. Make sense? Okay. So I'm not going to do this because it's going to charge me money. Okay. But just remember this is what you need to do in order to set up a disaster recovery. Okay. All right, so that's one. Let's look at some of the other things you can do. Backup files and folders, I think we talked about it. You can install you need the Azure recovery agent on each of the machines when you do that. Okay, so as part of your, let me show you one more thing as well. As we are here, I have not showed you this. Whenever you want to start your VM and you want to run certain additional applications on your VM, you can go to something called VM extensions. So you see this blade, I don't think I have shown you this. This is called extensions plus applications. So let's say you wanted to use your own backup agent or your own backup services, which is supported by Azure, right? You see here, right now, on my machine, I have Microsoft Monitoring Agent running. I have Insights Agent running, Dependency Agent running. Based on what services I select for that VM, it will start adding those applications and extensions. So whenever my VM starts, it installs these applications on top of my AMI. Right? Okay. So if I wanted to add some certain backup, right? So it says, okay, you can select the third-party backup agents, right? Like Mars or anything. If you want to put that on the extension, you can on the VM, you can go to the extension blade, select the application, and then it will start installing that applications and make sure that every time that VM starts, that application is installed and that agent is running. Okay. So you can have like two different kinds of agents running. One is the Mars agent, or you can have MIBs. Okay. Again, your recovery scenarios could be the same server or alternative server, right? So means I created the files and folders, but I can, as I was showing you, right, in the recovery, where it will give you a script, it will restore that VHD onto a shared drive, and then you can copy those files and folders from any VM. It doesn't have to be the same VM. Any VM you can copy in the files and folders. It's like just appears as a file share on that. You can also set up Azure Backup Server. Okay, Azure Backup Server is an application, okay, which allows you to orchestrate a backup across multiple VMs. This is used into a scenario when you want to like back up your on-prem servers, right? So let's say on your on-prem, you have like VMs like this, right? So let's say you have an on-prem environment like this, and you have many VMs in there, right? And then you might be taking some backups in your own data center right now, which you want to now move it to the cloud, right? So let's say this is your Azure cloud, right? And then you want to go to AZ backup here. Okay. In order to do this, in order to organize this, you need to install Azure backup server here. I'll call it ABS. Okay, so it's a software. You download it from Azure Cloud and then install onto on-prem, one of the machines in on-prem, right? So generally, when you do your backups in the data center, it has two components, agent and the server, okay? The server then goes to all the VMs where you have the agent running and then prepares them for the backup. Make sense? Right?
So you don't only need the agent, you need agent and ABS.
Yeah, so you put the ABS here. This ABS is then configured to your Azure backup service on the cloud, right? So here you create a vault, right? So you have a recovery vault here. Let's say you're in the East region, right? So you created a vault, right, called on-prem backup, right? So you create a vault called on-prem backup first, right? And then this guy, the ABS will coordinate, take all these backups and then put it into this vault. Make sense? Right? So that's for that, you need something called an Azure backup server, which you install on-prem, and then it will coordinate with your Azure recovery vault on the cloud. Okay. To protect, it has something called DPM, right? So data protection agent or service. You can install on that on the machines on the on-prem which you want to back up. Okay. So you can go through the steps. I think that's basically it says that first you need to install this agent and the servers. Okay. And then you can enable the DPM if you want to. And then they should be on-prem. Okay. And then if you are running this on Azure VMs in the cloud, you do the same thing here. Map server should be on the cloud. Make sense? So maps could be on-prem, it could be on cloud. Okay. And then map server, with map server, you can use tools of your choice to do the backup rather than using the backup server or backup services in the cloud. That's what it is. Okay. So you have your own software to backup, right? It will coordinate with this this server in order to store your backups into the cloud. That's the only thing it is doing. Okay. Site recovery, I think we talked about that. So this is another view of it, right? So you might have many servers, right? And then you have something called a traffic manager. So if you want to do a failover, you basically you remove this from the DNS entry, put a DNS entry here, and then you fail over here after your VMs have been recreated as part of the recovery process. Okay, so the steps are like, first you replicate the Azure VMs. You can also replicate the on-prem VMs. Okay, and then you can switch over as part of your recovery. A failover could be automatic, or based on what you want to do, you can do manual failover as well. Okay, so traffic manager can do an automatic failover based on the rules, or you can do it manually. When you do manually, your steps would be first to recreate the VMs from the recovery agent. So you go to the recovery vault and you say, okay, I want to recover all of these. And once it is recovered, right, you can just change the DNS record of the traffic manager. So instead of pointing to this region, it can point to this region. And your failover will be complete at that point in time. Make sense?
Mhm.
So there will always be some kind of a, so one thing to note here is right now we are talking about the warm standby. Either you take a local backup copy or you're talking about a replication. We are not talking about active. So that means there will be some downtime between when your site goes down versus when it will be available. Make sense?
Mhm.
In both cases, even let's say you're taking a local backup and local VM goes down, right? You have to restore it manually and then make it available. So the time it takes to restore from your backup is your downtime. That's your RTO objective. Make sense?
Well, mhm.
So for example, let's say you had a 500 GB of a disk attached to a machine. Let's say 500 GB VM takes 5 minutes to recover. So that means you have 5 minutes downtime. So if your RTO is within 5 minutes, you can do that.
No, I got you there. I was
Okay.
just thinking about point of recovery also as
Point of recovery right now, if you set daily backups, is 24 hours,
24 hours. So you're
right?
down is in hours you're right, but in
Yeah.
data and structure.
Yeah. So the RTO is 5 minutes, but your RPO is 24 hours based on what you have set up, right? You can say, I want to take backup every 1 hour.
Right.
Okay.
And then you're downtown.
And then you're down, your RPO will be 1 hour, RTO will be 5 minutes. Make sense? Right? If you wanted active, let's say you want RTO within 2 minutes and you want RPO 0, right? Then you can do active. You can do active replication and you can stand up those VMs, right? Automatically.
Sync between the two in each 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Because they will be running both of them.
Yeah. So it will be running all of them, right? So
that's like what they call it. That's different than a backup, right?
So that's active replication, right? So based on your cost budget and based on your RPO and RTO, you can set up your disaster recovery. Make sense? Right? Because anytime you're talking about backups or warm standby, right? It's always have some downtime and some data loss, right? The point is it within your RPO and RTO, can you tolerate? And if you tolerate, this is a good solution because it's not going to cost you much, right? Because if you want active, for example, you have 3 VMs here in this region, you want 3 VMs running on the other region, you're paying for those VMs. Make sense? Right? If you're paying, you might all as well load balance it, so you can use 6 VMs.
Correct, and that's the availability because you're now like,
Yeah.
for example, you would be in certain regions and all that stuff.
Yeah, but then the solution will be complex, solution will be costly. Because you need to know active application between the 2 regions. Make sense?
Yeah, you have to sync between the 2, right?
It's not only sync, it will be difficult. So let me show you like what kind of complexities you get into, right? I don't have a mouse. So let's say you have a simple application, right? I'll just put 2 servers here. Server 1, server 2. Right? Now I can say that these are like critical application. I don't want any downtime in this application, right? Makes sense? So it might have disks attached here, right? Right. So now what I can do is I can put a traffic manager and the load balancer to load balance between the 2, right? So it is going to both, right? So let's say this is my load balancer, right? So my traffic, certain traffic is here, some traffic is going here, everything is fine, everything is working, right? Active, right? The problem with this kind of solution is this guy also has 2 disks here, right?
Mhm.
When you say replication, right? Replication is a unidirectional thing. So if I set up an application like this, that means whatever I'm writing here is getting replicated here. But what about what I'm writing here? Then I need to set up an application like this.
Mhm.
Very difficult. Makes sense? Right? Because both the disks need to be in sync. If I delete one file from here, right, and somebody updates the same file here, now you're going to have conflict. Make sense?
Can we do the asynchronous?
What?
Asynchronous?
So the replication between the region is always async.
Well, you're forcing the same user, what they call it, forcing the same user to go to the same server all the time.
Yeah, that's a session persistence you're talking about.
Persistency, yeah, it's the
right?
persistency thing again.
Yeah, but the
But
problem
then
is,
you have setting out like a 5 minutes update to the other
yeah, but think
servers.
about if you want a disk replication, right? A disk is a disk. Disk doesn't know what user it is and all that, right? The disk your files. Let's say 100 files, right? And let's say every action here is adding one file here, and every action here is adding one file here, right?
Mhm.
As far as it is a new add, it's fine. The add will go here, add will go here. That will be a synchronous application. What if somebody modifies one file here and somebody modifies the same file here? Right? Now you're going to have conflicts.
But the timing, right? Decide.
We don't know.
They have to do it.
because it depends on like what is the speed of your network at that point. We don't know like which one is first and which one is second.
We have a timestamp, right?
You might have a timestamp, but timestamp has to be synchronized, and then we don't know actually it arrived late because of the latency, or it is really a late transaction. Make sense? Right? So generally, when you want to do this, you need to change your application architecture so that these apps are stateless, so that you don't need to get into this application scenario at all. Okay, stateless means all the state of this application, whatever it needs to store, goes somewhere else like a database or something, right? And then you can do a database application. When you do a database application, you have only one way. And then what you can do is your writes can go here, your reads can go here. You're just sending the read traffic here, it is make sure that it will never write here. So this one-way application will work in that case. Make sense?
But then you're not utilizing the VMs in this area.
You're using a return. So VMs are stateless. So VMs are connected to the database, right? Like this.
Well, I mean, the load balancer, are you still?
So what happens is that you need to have an intelligent load balancer here,
Before read it,
which will send only the read calls here. So it can distribute read calls between the two, but write calls always go to the primary region. Okay. What I'm saying is active replication is possible, very complex thing to achieve. You need to think through all these scenarios in order to achieve that, like zero downtime, for example. If you want to achieve, it is possible, very costly, and you might need certain application level or service level changes in order to achieve this. Okay, so that's why sometimes if you want to do writes across the regions, your IDB may not be the right choice. You might have to do Cosmos DB. Cosmos DB allows this multi-writes regions. So one write, it will put it here, another write, it will manage all those writes, updates, and deletes. So you have to choose the right solution for that. Okay. But just enough to show you that doing backup and restore is very less costly. It might involve certain downtime. You can minimize that by taking more backups. But if you take more backups, you have more storage costs. So things like you need to put all the constraint in place and then decide what is the best solution. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Right? What is my availability requirements? How much I can tolerate, in terms of data loss, a downtime, you might find a cheapest solution, right? Even if you think like you can tolerate 10 minutes or 15 minutes of downtime and then maybe an hours of a data loss, you might see that your solution might be millions of dollars cheaper than the active zero downtime solution. Okay. Good. Then I think we'll move on to the second topic, which is about like once you have set up all these, how do you monitor, right? I mean, from enterprise perspective, you might have much resources deployed on the cloud. You might have thousands of VMs. You might have, Kubernetes clusters. You might have like containers. You might have your database services. You might have your Cosmos DB, your storage solutions like blobs and all of that, right? How do you make sure that it is working according to your expectations? Not only they are available and usable, but are they performing, and giving you a right performance there so that your users are happy all the time, right? That's a very critical part of it, right? The first thing is, in order to achieve that, you need to first monitor, right? If you can monitor, then you can manage, right? So we say that in the Six Sigma, right? Lean technologies, right? If you want to have control over something, first you should expose it, what it is doing, right? So you should be monitoring that, right? Once you have the monitoring in place, then you can think about, is it monitoring as per your expectation or where it is from your expectation? And then you can put small improvements to see how you reach to your expectations. And so for example, your application right now is giving a performance of 10 seconds, but you want to get to the 5 seconds. First, you have to monitor and manage that, monitor and see if it is 10 seconds really or not, right? Once you know exactly 10 seconds and why it is 10 seconds, then you can go for like how to make it 9 seconds, 8 seconds, 7 seconds, and 5 seconds. Make sense? Right, so this is very important. And an enterprise might have so many applications, right? So you need to make sure that you're monitoring all of them. So many resources, right? So how do you create in the groups? How do you create admin groups who will look at what and things like that? It's very important. Okay. So monitoring will allow you to pick up the issues. Okay. And then it gives you a tool set of how you pick up the issues and then proactively alert you when it sees something like that. Okay. So your data sources for monitoring could come from anywhere, right? Your VMs, your infrastructure, your operating system, your applications, your platform services which you are using. Azure Monitor, even if you think in simple terms, Azure Monitor has like two kinds of resources which allows you to monitor everything. A streaming log or a matrix. Okay, streaming log or the matrix. And then there's different ways you can utilize them. You can visualize, meaning you can see the reports, you can see, graphs coming from there, or you can query whatever has been logged and then take an action based on that, right? So you need to just make sure that your sources are generating these two kinds of things, either your, metrics or your logs. And then you utilize it by using different services like insights or, workbooks or dashboards or, metrics explorer and things like that. So a lot of tools available under the Azure monitoring to do that. Okay, so let's look at a few of them. Okay, so as I said, there's two kinds of data sources, metrics and logs. What is metrics? Metrics are numerical values that describe some aspect of a system, right? So for example, CPU utilization is a matrix for your VM, or available memory or memory utilization is a matrix for your system, virtual machine, for example. So if you want to look at your virtual machine performance, you can look at what is the percentage CPU usage of that machine, or you can check how much available memory is there. And you want to see that it is maybe less than 80% of allocated memory. If it goes beyond that, you want to take some action. right? So metrics are all those numerical values, which you can chart, you can alert, you can do actions, things on that. Logs is different kinds of data organized into the records. So for example, your application logs, your developers have written the applications, and then they're logging certain key statements to find out if there are exceptions going on your application. Or your web server might be logging each and every web request. Or maybe Azure services by default might be logging certain events, right? And you want to analyze those events just to check, like, for example, if your VMs behind your load balancer, and your load balancer might be sending heartbeats to your VM, and you want to check like how many heartbeats are missed, how many heartbeats are, heartbeat events are, healthy, or how many are unhealthy, right? For that, you can do a log analysis. So two kinds of analysis, log analysis and metrics analysis. There are a lot of tools under the Azure Monitor, which allows you to explore all of these. Okay, so for example, here, right, you get all these data sources sending information to Azure Monitor through metrics and logs, right? Metrics you can visualize using dashboards, right? You can also create your Power BI reports from those metrics. You can create your dashboards using the workbooks, for example. You can also do metrics analysis or log analysis. Analytics means you can query, you can write the query, perform like SQL, and then execute that query and then see those reports, right? You can also respond to them by creating alerts, right? Or taking actions like auto scale, right? On auto scaling, we saw that, right? You can create the rule based on CPU alert and say, I want to scale my VMs horizontally by this many percentage, right? Or you can integrate them using different services like event hubs or your logic apps, meaning you can create a functional app to consume the logs and do something about it, right? So you have lots of options on visualizing, doing the analysis, as well as taking the actions on that. Okay. The good thing is that it is a central piece. So it's exactly similar way available to all the resources like backup and restore. Okay. So in order to understand that, I'll go through a portal and then we'll go through each section of the monitor and understand what it is exposing. Okay. So let's do that. Let's go to the portal and let's log into the monitor. So here I am, and I want to say Azure Monitor. So if you type monitor here, it will show you a monitor. This is the Azure Monitor, okay? Under the monitor, you will see all these toolings. Your activity log, your alerts, your metrics, your logs, your change analysis, your service health, and the workbooks, okay? These are all the tools. In addition to that, you have something called insights, right? For that, you need to enable certain more things on your subscription, but it will give you more insights into your applications, virtual machines, and all other services from where the app insights are coming. So app insights are like a log analytics where it dumps a lot of log, and then you can query it and take action based on that. So it's like more in-depth than just simple log analytics. Simple log analytics is like there's a fixed set of logs which you can capture and then analyze. If you want more insight into that, you can do App Insight, which is basically a custom plugin. So your apps can send more data to App Insights, and then you can visualize from that. Okay. So we'll go through some of these one by one and look at it. Okay. So the first thing is the metrics. So let's look at the metrics. So metrics is basically you can chart certain values based on the resource, right? So when you say, okay, so when you're on the monitor, right, it will ask you for which resource you want to do it. You can do certain things at the subscription level. You can do resource group level or a particular resource level. Okay, so yeah, not management groups, but subscription, resource groups, and resource. Management groups are generally used for the permissions and policies, not for this kind of analysis. Okay. But if you go to individual resources, that monitor is available for that particular resource. So for example, if I did not start here, but if I go to my VMs, let me open another screen. And let's say I start on my VM. For example, if I go to this VM, right, you'll still see things like monitors. So if I go here under the monitoring, when I go here, my resource is already selected, my VM, right? So it's going to show me everything about my VM. So if I go to matrix here, for example, I don't have to select anything because it already knows that I need a matrix for this VM. Make sense? If I go monitor, then I can do it at the resource group level or particular resource level. Or I can go to particular resource and check it. So for example, for this VM, right? If I want to check, let's say, these are the available metric right now. I can select any of these, right? So for example, it says available memory, right? If I want to check, monitor the available memory, right? It will show me a graph of that, right, over time. Make sense? So for this WVM1, right, I had only 266 MB available at this time, right? Then my availability memory went up and now it is coming down, right? So as I'm using more and more of that VM, my memory will go down.
How does the cost structure work for this?
Metrics. It's free.
All the metrics are free?
Yeah, some of the metrics are free. Some, so like App Insights might require more money. Right?
But the metrics.
But all the basic metrics, all the basic log analytics is free. Log analytics and the App Insights uses the storage. So you get two parts of it. You get charge based on the storage and the functionality, the queries you are doing.
That's for
Right.
insight.
Yeah, for the insight. But basic things are always free and here. So you will get basic metrics and basic log analytics for free in Azure.
And if you create a report for them, they're still free
Yeah, that's true.
based on the metrics and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And then include them in dashboard as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So now from here, you can, right now it is showing a line chart, right? If I want to change it to, for example, bar chart, right? I can create a bar chart, right? Or I can do an area chart, for example, right? So you have different visualizations available based on what you want to see and how you want to see it. You can also put in a dashboard. So you can create like an enterprise dashboard and say, hey, I want to put this 5 graphs into that dashboard, and you can put it there and then watch it from that dashboard. Okay, you can also drill down to the log. So if you set up a log analytics and you can say, hey, I want to zoom in this area in the logs, it will show in the logs how these performance counters are captured and what are the individual values of that.
When you say to set up, the logs are not automatically generated?
Log analytics is not automatically set up. Metrics is automatically set up.
Okay.
So metrics you will always see. Okay.
So logs you have to ask.
Yeah, so we'll go
Because
through
there's
that.
storage to it.
Yeah, there is a storage to it,
Okay.
and that's fine. So you have to set up a log analytics workspace where it will store all your analytics.
No, the metrics should have a storage too, right?
So metrics has some storage, but it's a fixed storage, right? Log analytics, you don't know how much you will use based on how much logs your application is dumping.
Metrics too, I mean, it depends on the time, right?
No, the metric is not, it's
How
an
far you go
accumulated time, but it's basically fixed, right? So for example, go to add metric, I can select only these. I cannot add. Make sense?
So if you run into an issue,
No, so log is like continuous log, right? What your application is dumping, console logs and things like that. So you don't know how much storage it will take.
The metrics too, they have to, like, if they have to track time. I mean, if it's a snapshot only for the last 5 minutes, I can understand that. But
So that's what it does. It only gives you certain time metrics. It's not going to be for always. Okay. If you want to go
like
beyond
30
the
days,
right.
last 30 days,
Yeah. So it goes up to last 24 hours. If you do custom,
still showing
Right.
30 days there,
Yeah.
right? Like last 30 days.
which one? Yeah, so maximum is last 30 days. You can do custom as well, but you cannot go beyond certain unless you pay for it. And then right now, the way it calculates the performance matrix is on 5-minute stamp
increment.
increments. If you want to do it detailed like 1 minute increments, you have to pay for that.
Okay, I got it.
Okay. So yeah, so the metric is basically a numerical value on which you can do, things like average, a maximum, minimum, sum, and then chart it. Okay, like this. And then you can keep adding the metric and things like that. So if I wanted to add, for example, another metric, where is the add metric here? And then you can say, hey, I want to add CPU utilization, for example, percentage CPU.
It's not because the metrics usually demand calculations.
Yeah, so it
And the
doesn't.
logs doesn't. It's just
Yeah.
like,
Yes, it adds the number there rather than creating a new row. Makes sense?
it still has to
Only for the
calculate
timestamp.
Right.
5-minute timestamp interval.
Just
it's going
calculate
to take, yeah. Yeah.
to the next. Mhm.
Okay. So that's how you use the matrix, for example. And you can create like add matrix to the same graph, or you can create multiple graphs and then add the matrix separately on each of them.
So that's high utilization, right?
Yeah. So if you want to see the CPU utilizations, let's see.
Getting overheated.
It's getting overheated. Yeah, you can see that. So let's say I remove this one, and you'll be able to see my CPU utilization. So it was 16% before.
That's a bad thing.
Right now it is
Oh,
almost 0%. Means there is not much activity going on in that machine right now. Make sense?
No, yeah, I see that for the CPU.
Yeah.
it's funny, my work users compare their home laptop and their work. Oh, I'm getting better CPU on my home laptop. What's wrong with my work laptop? Why are you comparing work and home laptop? It's like crazy tickets you get.
Yeah.
Because you gotta run millions of applications, that's why.
Yeah.
Oh, the CPU is so high, I can't, it's overheating.
Black and white, so different.
Yeah. You're doing Apple Store and comparison, right?
Yes, Apple and Orange, don't you know? It's not same.
I prefer my personal for my, like, for example, if you work in financial, they have this limitation of what they can.
Yeah, what you can do.
Software they can put in.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. So when they get there and they don't renew their hardware
Yeah.
as easy. So usually when they get you, like they have thousands and thousands of laptops. And there's priorities between, if you are in IT, you have high priority. If you are in, like you see, you have less. So now if you are in business and you want a laptop, they don't give you a new one. You have
The
to be
old
in the
one.
top tier
Yeah.
to get a new one. You get what IT doesn't want.
Yeah.
So now.
They will re-image it and then
Correct.
give it to you.
And so when you run, for example, data analytics and all that, they demand more than IT.
Yeah.
Right.
And so those teams you usually need higher, and they don't get that. Like in the beginning, they go, "Oh, we have to save money."
So that
can
is
you
the-
live with this.
That is the advantage of cloud. Nowadays, nobody gives you much on your laptop. They'll say, use the cloud. For example,
Yeah,
if I need to
yeah.
use my data analytics, they'll give me some virtual machine on the cloud. You can run it there. So that can be shared between like a lot of data analytics.
That
So,
started when, like 5 years ago.
yeah. So
That's what they do.
yeah. So now even
But in that also there is
Use the
discrimination.
virtual-
for my consulting work, they sent me their laptop, right?
Mhm.
So nowadays I get 256 GB SSD on that, and it's so lightweight, it's so good. I can take it anywhere like my purse, right? And then work from that because all my heavyweight things are on the cloud, right? So I have like a Kubernetes cluster with like 60 nodes on which I can run whatever I want, right?
Yeah.
So
But even in that, there is discrimination because there's the pro ones
Yeah,
that
yeah.
are for the high elites, people that need a heavy thing, and then
Yeah,
you
but
have
like,
the normal
same thing,
standard
like for the
ones.
business people, they'll not give the Kubernetes
Yeah.
cluster with 60 nodes. They'll say that this is your VM, you can run something more.
You always have those three things. here.
Exactly.
Okay, that's standard.
Yeah. For me, if I put a ticket and say I need this software within 15 minutes, it appears
they've
on my
got it.
machine. Yeah,
Posted right on.
yeah, because it's like hourly charging them, right?
Well, it's
If it
automatic.
should have, no, I'm
It's-
charging them
yeah, it's
hourly, right? So
automatic
like
for
if
you.
they don't give me, then I'm just waiting. And they're paying me for just waiting, right? So yeah, so this is the matrix view, and easiest view where you can like view, and it's same. Like if you go to Cosmos DB, it will give you the similar different metrics. So if you go to Cosmos DB, it will be like how many reads you are doing on that, how many SQLs you are running on that, and how many RUs you are consuming. So you can see all those metrics, and then you can take certain actions on that. The other simple part which monitor is doing is this, which is called activity logs, which is in a different section, because this activity log is mainly for the auditing purpose rather than logging and monitoring, but still very important. This will tell you what are the activities happening on that VM. So for example, if the VM shut down, it will show you the activity like when it was shut down, what was the status, what was the timestamp, and then who initiated that shutdown. So for example, if you want to know if some VM is not working, you can go here and check the audit. So this is audit, meaning what happened, at what time, and who is responsible for that. So if you want to do auditing activities, you go to the activity log, which is kind of part of the monitoring, but in a separate section because it is more like auditing rather than responding to your performance events, for
Do
example.
you have access to this log even when the VM is deleted?
Yeah. So you can go to the Azure VM or like the VM monitor instead of coming to the particular VM because the VM does not exist, right?
Okay.
So you can go to the monitor and then say, okay, give me all the events at the subscription level. So it will show all the events up to,
Has closed. deleted,
Exactly.
and everything.
exactly
Okay.
everything, you'll see it there. There you can select your scope.
Yeah.
Here you are in particular resource. Okay. So let's see what else I'm going to cover in this. I don't want to miss anything. So VM activity log alert. So let's create an alert. So let's say I want to create an alert for this Azure VM saying, hey, my CPU utilization goes beyond 70% or 50%, right? I want to be alerted rather than, watching this, right? Because ultimately, if certain things you're watching and critical, you want to be proactive, right? And you may not be, watching it on the monitor all the time, right? So you want to be, proactively notified about those particular events, right? So you can create alerts based on your metrics, or you can create alert based on your logs. So if you wanted to create an alert based on our metric, let's go back to the metrics screen again. Right? And then we can create an alert from here. Come on. So right now we don't have any alerts, right? So you can enable recommended alert rules, so that will automatically say for this kind of resource, what are the recommended rules, it will add it. Or you can create your own rule. Okay, so if you want to create an own rule, it will say what is the signal you want to use,
Trigger.
right? So what is the trigger, right? Is it a log or is it metrics or activity log or resource health, right? So is your trigger based on the metrics or some statement in the log or something on the audit log or something on the resource health?
What is the difference between the log and active log here? Are they?
Activity
the
logs, as I
activity
was
log
showing, are the
is
audit
not
events.
included in the log?
No, so activity logs are filtered as like audit events,
Mhm.
right? Like who started this VM, who stopped this VM, who deleted this VM, right? And what time it was deleted. Log is like a general log
Okay.
stream. You can query on it. Okay. Matrix is the number. So if I select matrix, right, then it will say which service, right? So I can say all services, and then it will show me what are the metrics available to me right now. Make sense? Right, so I can say, hey, I want to use because I'm in the VM, right? It is showing me the VM related metrics. Make sense? So if I go again back to the CPU, so for example, percentage CPU, right? I can create a rule here. Okay, so alert has a scope. Scope could be a resource like a VM, or it could be a resource group, it could be a subscription, or a service like Cosmos DB. Make sense? This is something which comes up in the exam.
What this?
Yeah, meaning what components you need to fill up in order to create an alert. The first is scope, second is conditions. Let me show you the condition. So if I want to create a condition based on a static threshold saying, hey, I want to take an average, right? Because I selected CPU, right? Percentage CPU, right? So I can take an average, or I can say maximum, minimum, total, or a count. Right? So if I say average makes sense for me, and then I say if it is greater than a threshold value, let's say 50%. Make sense? So this is how you create a condition. So your scope includes your metric, for example, or a log, and then a threshold, aggregation type operator, and threshold value. And then how do you evaluate? When I say average, what do you mean by average? Right? How much average you want to take? So for example, I want to take an average every 15 minutes, for example, right? But then if you want to do that, my look back period should be more than that, right? So look back period is like how long I should check that, right?
Keep the data for it.
Yeah, so I say I want to check it every 15 minutes, but I don't want to do on last moment, but I want to look at last 30 minutes. So I want to look at two samples and take an average and then trigger it. Make sense? Right? Check every means every 50 minutes you check. How many times depends on your look back period, right? So if I say for last 24 hours, check for every 15 minutes and see if my average CPU threshold is greater than 50% or not. Make sense? Then only trigger, right? So you create a rule. This is called a rule or logic. Here is a condition. Make sense? So once this is met, what you want to do is in the actions. Make sense? So if I go to the actions, right now, there is nothing here. Meaning it will check, but it will not do anything, right? But let's say I want it to do something based on that, right? So if I do not do anything now, it's fine. It will give me still the alert, how many times this alert fired. But in order to watch that, I will have to go to the monitor and watch, right? But let's say I want to do some action now on top of that, right? So I can say create a new action group. So in actions are sent to the action groups, right? Action groups could be your system admins that, hey, I want to notify these admins who are responsible for these VMs when this event occurs. Make sense? Or I want to let these architects know that this is happening, right? So you can create an action group. It could be architects, it could be your department head, it could be system admins based on how your organization is set up. Let's say first I create an action group here. Okay, it's a separate process to create an action group. So you can independently create action groups and then assign the alerts to them. Okay, so let's say my action group name is architects. I want to notify architects if something like this happens. Okay, and then I can specify notifications for them that architects can be contacted, let's say through Azure SMS message. Okay, and then I can provide them names saying all notifications. And here is the mode of notifications. You can specify an email where it needs to be sent. So you might create like a distribution group in the email and provide that. You can create the DLs. You can allow maybe an SMS message, like you might have corporate mobile phone or corporate number where you want to send a message, and from there it can trigger, right? Or maybe a voicemail or whatever, right? You can set up all of those notifications for the action groups here. Okay. And once you have done that, you can say actions. So this is an additional action. Okay, so the notification is one thing. So action group, when you create it, right? If some alert happens, they will be notified automatically. Right? But that's something when somebody will have to look and do something about it. What if you want to automate that something about it thing? Right? So for example, if this VM is very high, I want to deploy another VM as a automatic action. I can do that as well. Make sense? Right? So those actions you can specify here. Okay. I want to, for example, run an Azure function if something happens like that. Okay. And then you give the Azure function name, and then it will take care of like creating a new VM or whatever. Right. So you want to take that action automatically, you can specify that. But this is an optional step. Let's say I want to just notify people and they will take the action. Then I don't need to define the action here. Okay. So let's say I do review and create here. My action group will be created. Okay, so now what it is saying is now I'm back to my alert. So I defined the scope, I have defined the condition, I've defined the actions. Make sense? That you need to notify these architects. Okay. Then the main details about the rules. So I can say, hey, this is a CPU. I can specify the severity. So based on that, they will get notified, like in the subject line, they will see either critical or informational warning. So they don't know they have to act it on immediately or not, right? I can say, hey, it's just a warning, for example. And then I can specify the description. This description will be sent to them as an email saying, hey, CPU on this app is very high. We may need to check app log. Okay. Maybe my application is not performing well and I want them to look at the application log. Okay. And then others are tags and review, which is fine. I create this. So now I can create this rule and then it will tell me. If I go to the alerts, it will say, you know, how many rules you have, how many total alerts you have right now. And based on the filter, you can say like how many, you know, error alerts I had or how many warning alerts or all of that. You can view it from here now. Makes sense, right? So at any point in time, maybe you have missed the alert, right? You can come to the screen and see if you have missed any alerts. You know, sometimes people's email go to the junk box, right?
Yeah.
So just to make sure, like, so I think these are like SOPs, standard operating procedures for organizations. And organizations may have different procedures, right? Like architects may not be looking at this every day, but like system admins, they might have procedure like as soon as I open my laptop, these are the things I want to check. I want to check the alerts, I want to check my dashboard, I want to check my performance monitoring, right? And then they can take an action. Architects might be once in a while, let me check how my application is doing, how many alerts it fired, right? What people did about that, right? So there are different consumptions for all of these things, but these are like very, very important things, right? If you set up an Azure, you should have all the alerts set up, monitoring rules set up so that you can work on it, right? Whenever I do a production deployment, I first check there should be at least 50 alerts on that. If they don't have it, I don't allow them to deploy.
50?
Yeah, minimum 50 rules you need to have. Okay, to tell me what you are monitoring and why you are monitoring and why you are not monitoring certain things, right? And that's why they had a rule, right? Like create automatically alert rules for these default rules. To tell you what is, you know, what Azure is recommending you to monitor. Okay, so you can click on that and see all the rules on a VM, or all the rules on a Cosmos DB, all the rules on a database, all the rules on a VNet, right, or the firewalls, right? It's very important that these are things are set up, because this is, your operational procedure. This is how an IT organization works, right? This is part of your operation, right?
Mhm.
I want to check activity log. Activity log will tell me if I have any, failed login attempts. I would know, like somebody's trying to, log in, for this account. Maybe I'll ask that account user to change his password and things like that, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
In mine, we used to have this even for the business side.
Yeah.
Because that eliminates the tickets.
Yeah, that's
Because once they
correct.
receive the thing, they know there's a problem, they're going to send a ticket. So that because you have on one shift, you have more than 1,500 people working. If each one had a problem, sending you a ticket.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. Correct.
Mhm.
And that's why certain things, if you're sure what actions you are going to take, you should automate those actions,
Mhm.
right? So you don't have to come here and then think about what actions to take, because your action is also automated. So you can check like, hey, this alert fired, this action was taken, and now I don't have that problem anymore.
That's if you are sophisticated.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the things you can do with the matrix. You can create alerts and things like that. Now let's look at the logs or log analytics. Okay, so let me see you're not forgetting anything. Okay. So yeah, for logs, you need to create something called log analytic workspace where your VMs and other logs will be stored. Okay. So let's go to the logs here.
What they are calling workspace.
It's called a log analytic workspace. So right now I have already set it up, so it is not showing you. But if I did not set up, right, it will tell me that I need to create a log analytic workspace. It's a very simple thing. You go here and it will say, create a log analytic workspace. You click on that. What it does, it creates a storage where it's going to dump your analytic logs. Okay. But once you set it up, you will be able to see certain logs. So for example, what I see in the logs is set in the diagnostic settings. If I go to diagnostic settings, okay, says what things are getting diagnosed here for this VM. So for example, for matrix, right, these are the performance counters enabled, CPU, memory, disk, and this, but not these. Okay, so if you want to set up, let's say you are running a SQL Server on your machine, on a VM, and you wanted a SQL Server performance counter, you can set this up and you will get the SQL Server performance counters.
Mhm.
Things like how many connections are open, how many queries are getting, done in particular second, and all of those counters will be set up here.
So what's in the CPU memory that they're going to give you here that they're not giving you in the network?
No, this is about the matrix. So it is already telling you that
Okay.
CPU, memory, disk, it's getting measured.
Never look at.
If you remove that, you will not get the CPU matrix.
Okay, so the logs.
Yeah.
Here are
Yeah,
the control.
yeah, and you can do custom as well, but it might require some more money you have to pay, but you can add more counters as well. Now, if you go to the logs, it says these are the things it's going to log. This is what is getting into the log analytics. Make sense?
Critical error warning.
So it is doing an event log with all the critical error and warning events. Like the way in Windows you might have seen the event logs, right? It's the same thing. So critical warning and error level events are getting logged into the log analytics. Okay. Same thing, security-wise, audit success, audit failure. So right now it is only sending audit failures, meaning if somebody tried to do invalid login attempt, it will be logged. But if it's successful, it's not going to log it. If you want that successful, you can set it up like this here. Okay. Okay. And then a lot of other things like what IIS is sending, and if you're like application logs, right? So application,
Alerts, huh?
what?
My battery's hot. No alerts.
So right now it is saying application logs are disabled. For if .NET applications you wanted to enable, you can enable those logs. Event tracing also you can do enable, right? So all of these you will set up here and then it will appear in your logs. You can also get the crash dumps from your machine. Right.
Basically, I mean, basically, they are logging all this, they're just not shown. Let's see, you're just triggering those by those options.
No, once you set up those options, they will start saving those.
But they don't save those for themselves as an Azure.
No, they don't need to monitor those things. That's as an application developer, you might be interested in some of them.
Okay.
Okay. Infrastructure logs there you will get, like if underlying hardware is a problem or VM is going down for some reason or shut down, those things you will get. But within the VM, your Windows errors or application errors or security errors, you will not get it because they don't know what you're deployed as a VM. Okay. Once you are set up, you can go to the logs. Okay. Let me discard what is this. The diagnostic setting is where you set up like what you want to watch for in terms of metrics and logs. Now, the log analytics space is kind of a structured data space. So they log events, they log application logs in different tables. So it is like think like it's a relational database. It has certain tables. Like for performance counters, they have a table like performance counter. For events, they have a table called events, right? And things like that. So in order to do the analytics, you do the query. Like the way you do SQL query, there's a query language for log analytics. And it's named as Custo query language, KQL, or Custo query language, or Custo query language. Not Custo, I always pronounce it wrong. It's a Custo query language. Okay. So you can write your queries and analyze the logs. Some of the examples are here. So for example, let's say I want to do a query on virtual machine available memory, or let's see that already we have seen the metrics, right? So let's see what else we have here. So you have a lot of things here, right? Let me show an example. Let's take it the first one, right? Virtual memory. If I run this query, so you see the query is written here. The way you write the Custo query is first write a table. So you should know what is the table name. Okay, so if it is a performance counter, it's going to come from the performance table, right? You said the all of your operations are separated by this vertical bar, right? So it's a perf, and then you start putting your queries like where object name is memory because you selected the memory, right? So in that table, there is a field called object name. So it will have values like memory or CPU and things like that. Okay. And then you have counter. So there's another field called counter. So we are looking at the available bytes memory counter, and then this, and then we are doing a summarize. So all the operations are separated by this vertical bar, right?
Five.
Yes. Yeah, we call it pipe. And then summarize, and then we render. Render could be a chart or could be a table or whatever. Make sense? And then you run this query. Okay. So once you do that, it will show up either a results table here or a chart here. Make sense? Right? And then you can save and share and create an alert from there. So you can create alert from a matrix, or you can create alert from the log analytics as well. Makes sense? Right? But you need to know like how to write this query. So sometimes in the certification exam, this query will come up. Okay.
This language is called.
This is called Custo query language, KQL. Okay. So the questions are very simple on this. They might ask you, they might give you a query like this, and they might ask you like, what are we measuring here? So you might have to look at first, like, is it an event or a counter or something like that, right? So they will give you like this query, and they might have options like average CPU or critical errors or available memory, and then generally they will be almost similar. From the query, you can find out exactly what it is doing, right? Meaning it is available memory, and then the pipe or the operation is summarized and it's going to chart. So they might ask you, is it going to be a table or is it a chart? But looking at this, you don't have to really learn this language, but looking at the query, you should be able to answer certain basic questions. Makes sense? Right? So chart CPU usage trends, for example. So if I want to do this, right, I can directly run this, or I can, give me 1 second, why it is behaving. And I can load into the editor. Load into the editor means I want to load and then modify certain things before I want to run, right? So this will give you a startup like how the query looks like, for example, right? So for a CPU, its counter name is percentage processor time. Object is processor. Summarizing is, you see here, average. They might ask you about how it is done. So it is saying average counter value, right? So average of the percentage CPU time. And then it is doing a bin operation, right? So it's going to create a 15-minute beans, and then it's going to show in the chart. Make sense? Okay. And I will show you the chart. So let's say if I want to run this, so you can select here and run a particular query. So if you have multiple queries, you can just, I think, select like this and say, hey, run this query, for example, for me. Okay, it will do that. Okay. Right now, since I've just created this, it has not dumped in enough information to show up something here. Okay. And then like, so you have helpers here, right? And then let's say, let's look at something else. Use of clear text password, for example. This is an audit event, right? So this might be from the events table, no, security event, right? So there is a table called security event, where it is auditing, right? Saying event ID is 4624 for this, right? Logon type is 8, and then you want to do a count, right? So what it's going to give you is how many times a clear text password was used, by particular account or resource. Make sense? Right? So it is summarizing count, number of attempts. It is summarizing, right? And like you have different groups as well. So you have alerts, you have, for example, availability related. A count of heartbeats I was saying, right? So how many times the heartbeat failed, for example, how many times the heartbeat message is generated, you know, to see how the table is heartbeat, and then there is a where. You see, ago means in last 1 hour. There's a ago function, and if you pass the parameter. Okay, so it's like in last 1 hour, give me the total number of heartbeats sent to this VM.
Summarized by VM.
Right? By computer. Make sense?
Computer is
It's the VM. Yeah. So if I run this, it should give me like for each VM, it should give me. So it has count like 60 because I might have sent every 1 second heartbeat. So it is saying your count is 60. Now I can do a table. I can do a chart. Make sense? Right. Okay. Same thing like if I want to look at the errors. So I can go to any event table and then look at the events like errors. So event table where it's going to show the event level is error, and then it is joining with security updates and all other tables to make sure that it doesn't miss any events. And then you can create that. So if I run this events, let's see, I like much. But if I run it if I keep my VM running for 24 hours, I'll get all these updates. Make sense? So this is how you can run your log analytics. Log analytics basically, all your analytics is stored in tables. So if your application is generating events, it will go to the event table, and then you can further filter it based on the application name or whatever, and then you can say, hey, how many exceptions this application generated? So it will come from the events table. Make sense?
And I'm guessing there is an article on their website where it shows you the tables that exist.
Yeah. So I think there's a help where it shows you all the tables and where exactly everything is going, like which kind of analytic will go to which table, right? And when you have like your custom applications, in your application, when you send the log to the log analytics, you can say where it should end up. Make sense? Okay. And then you can set up application insight. Application insights works similar to this, right? But it has other functionalities, which is like based on the machine learning, it does that, right? So you can generally set that up, but it will be charged a bit more. So you can create the analysis of the data, and then it will start doing the app analytics on your VM or on your application or whatever you want. Okay. Which is similar to your log analytics. You can still query with the similar language on the app.
It's just predictive.
Yeah. So it has more details about that. Okay.
The other ones are descriptive and this
Yeah.
one is predictive.
And then you can create like workbooks like this, which I was talking about, right? So for example, for this VM, I want to know the overview of the VM. So it is already set of graphs created for me, right? For this. So it's like a dashboard of all the metrics which you want to monitor at this resource level, right? So you have CPU percentage metrics, and disk reads and writes, and then the network in and out. You can add it as well. So you can edit the workbook. It will show you the UI kind of visually. You can keep starting add. And then you can say, hey, what do you want to add? You want to add a metric, you want to add query, you want to do something else, right? So you can create a workbooks like that. And then it's like a dashboard for you yourself, and then you can look at the workbooks. Make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So these are all the monitoring, tools available under the Azure. Okay. And the specific questions asked, I mean, sometimes they ask like, hey, you have some application running and you want to find the health of your application. And then it will ask you, the answers would be, what will you set up as monitors? For example, it is VM related, it would be your performance counters. If it is database related, it will be your read writes and things like that. So those things you'll have to select from there. Okay.